Hello, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Oh, we're so close to Sagittarius season. So, welcome to the Starseed Ministry. It is Monday, November 21st, 2022. Yes, for the Sag people out there, I'm sure you can feel it. We're getting so close to the sun. Moving into the sign of Sagittarius today, Mercury and Venus will be conjunct in Sagittarius between 7 and 8 degrees of Sagittarius for those of you who are into the Sabian symbols. We're going to talk a little bit about space weather, of course, always looking at what our sun soul is up to and how it's impacting us. I have a reading to share with you today that is, it's a little interesting, and always keeping us a couple steps ahead of even ourselves in a lot of ways. And we'll go over some astrology for the week. So welcome everyone, welcome back. If you're new to this channel, thank you for being here. And as always, if you enjoy this content, you find it helpful, please consider subscribing to this channel, regardless of what platform you're on. Smash that like button, comment, share. All of those things do have an impact on this channel growing, and most importantly, for it to reach other people and bring them into the fold of the Starseed ministry. So I appreciate everything that you can do to help that process. Welcome to the Starseed Fellowship. Wow, we had an incredible Zoom call this week. On Wednesday. It went for many hours. It was like about 2.5, almost 3 hours. You know, some people came on later, right? There were some people that left and then came back. It was very, very spirited, and it went through a lot of territory, right? We talked very personally about some things that are weighing on people, or just individual processes that we're going through in our own lives. We got to nerd out onto some astrology stuff for a little while, and wow, it was pretty phenomenal, and I really enjoyed it. So if you're interested in being part of the Starseed Fellowship, being part of a community of other people who identify as Starseed and Lightworker, or just people who are waking up and are looking for other people to share that experience with, because most of us, I could venture to say at this point, many of us don't really find too much of that interaction in our daily lives, although it's really important that we're showing up and being present in exactly where we are, because we wouldn't be there if we weren't supposed to be there right now. So, but this is also a space where people can come and share. It's not a necessarily a space where I am telling you or guiding anyone through their process. We are really just coming together as Starseed. So everything you need is in the description box below in terms of links to get more information. You go to the website for Catalyst Energies, and yeah, so being a very heavy Sagittarius person, at least in my natal chart, you can tell that I'm really feeling it. Right now I have a stellium in Sagittarius, I have a 10th house sun in Sagittarius, I have a stack up of Sag in my 11th house, I have my fortune at the galactic center. So this time of year is always a time for me to be really feeling it. I was actually sharing my walk-in experience with someone over the weekend, and it was around this time, not only was I integrating my walk-in experience, which was in October 2019, but it was also late November of 2019 when I started Catalyst Energies. Venus and Jupiter were conjunct at the galactic center, actually, when that happened. And so there's just a lot coming up. But one of the things that I am, of course, always bringing around to be a wet blanket for everyone is that as much as we are feeling that catalyzing, purifying fire that is the Sagittarius transmutation, right? It is the coal fire, right? Anybody that has built a fire and has cooked on it knows that it's really when it gets down to the coals is where it's hot enough to actually cook on. And cooking is just a chemical reaction, right? You are using heat as a catalyzing factor to change the actual nature of the food, right? Things are getting changed around, enzymes are activating, and it's the same thing with us in our own journey, our spiritual journey. So, but one of the things is to not get too caught up in the Oh God, in the process itself, right? Knowing that the friction that comes from duality, polarity, is what is the catalyzing factor, right? Just like you're rubbing those two sticks together in order to create a fire. And actually, the Sagittarius lunar transit forecast for the new moon, which is going to be on Wednesday, on the 23rd, Jupiter, the ruling planet, is about to go direct in another sign that it rules, which is Pisces. So there is a lot of optimism. There is a lot of expansion, good fortune, beneficence, all of that stuff that Jupiter and Sagittarius represents is in the stars here, or is on the menu, so to speak. But, and I was very, I wouldn't say stern, maybe some people would. And of course, I was talking to myself as I was giving that forecast because of all the Sagittarius in my chart. It's really important that we don't get ahead of ourselves, that we don't embody that self-righteous and overly judgmental nature of Sagittarius as we get really into the big picture, optimism, glass half full, right? These are all amazing things, and in no way do I want to detract from that. But as we're going to see in today's reading, if we are not being realistic still with not only where our healing journey is still taking us, but not taking that broad perspective, that bird's eye view, and not getting caught up in belief systems, right? That's one thing that is a pretty strong resonance of the Sagittarius sign, the ninth house, is belief, right? And understanding broad perspectives, the ninth house energies of advanced training and higher education and travel and these cosmic vistas are so important for wisdom, but we can't get caught up in the belief because that crystallizes into Capricorn and 10th house, and we all know what's going on there, right? Pluto, of course. So even the most entrenched and crystallized belief systems will always change and morph, and it's like an infinite fractal unfolding. The more knowledge that we allow into our own quantum computing system, which is really just our own consciousness and our brain. So, and the best way to do that is, as we're going to see, sometimes you have to be forced into isolation or forced into some sort of condition that keeps you away from the interaction, right? This is where Lilith, in conjunction with the star Sirius just over the weekend, and actually making a connection to the moon's nodes just this morning, is a really important thing to consider, is that where is your root system? Because that's going to determine how, the strength of your own foundation, and knowing that space is truly infinite. And when you can consider that, then there's always space for your understanding to expand into. So we'll get into that with the reading. So I want to check in with the stream here, see what's going on. Happy Monday from VZ. I hope this week brings warmer weather to you all. Yeah, it is absolutely frigid where I'm at. I can't say for you, but of course it is. It is definitely down in the teens at night already, and we haven't even gotten to December. So that wood stove has been a pretty consistent thing over the weekend, and I don't mind it because now I get to hide inside and go into full hermit mode in my onesie and read all the books that I have been putting off for so long. But yeah, it's definitely cold. And for people who are traveling this weekend, right, that's something to be very aware of. So Alex K says, morning, finally made it back to a live stream. I would imagine it's because your break has started, and it's so good to see you on here. I know, my friend, you have been very busy with your new job and everything that it entails, and I'm really glad that you made that transition. But it's also really great to see you here, so thank you for taking the time to be here on your break. So we had some solar weather going on. What I think is particularly interesting is that we also had a couple blasts of the Schumann. When I say blast, it's not really a blast, it's more of just like an amplified, the volume got a little bit louder over the weekend. weekend in a couple points. And there was this huge, very large coronal hole that's been facing us. And so I was kind of anticipating a little bit more of a like, whoa, right? With all of the solar wind, right? All of those symptoms that seem to come along with it, right? Elevated inflammation, people getting headaches, getting migraines, sleep just being a non-thing. I'm lucky. I can't speak for everyone, so I'm curious, but I'm lucky to get a good night of sleep once a week. At this point, it's just like, 5-6 days of constant astral travel and then one really deep night of sleep. And that's just been the consistent pattern here. So I did expect on some level that there would be a lot of disruption, but it wasn't as physically as uncomfortable as I had anticipated, and it certainly wasn't like a massive geomagnetic storm. And I think that, the Schumann might have had something to do with that, right? That amplified twice in one day, basically. And I feel like that was a buffer, right? Now, of course, there have been a lot of earthquakes, a lot of big ones that have been happening. Mostly on the Asia side of the Pacific Ring of Fire, as we're going to see. But that coronal hole the solar wind is really reaching its peak to us right now, and it still doesn't feel that intense. And so I'm curious what people are feeling, how their sleep has been. I talked to a neighbor as they were driving by yesterday as I was walking around, and they were just mentioning something. I suggested the Pure Sleep to them, and they're like, it's not, nothing's working. And I was like, don't feel bad, because nobody's sleeping right now. So if you're really struggling with that, just know it's just kind of part of what's going on, and you find your rest whenever you can. I take Reiki naps on a regular basis. So if you are attuned to Reiki, or you have that certain sound healing track that really does it for you, I take those little 20-minute, half-hour Reiki naps on a regular basis, and that really recharges me. So that's a suggestion. Of course, Epsom salt baths are amazing. You put some lavender oil in there to really calm the nervous system. But, take it where you can get it, my friends, because it has been pretty difficult in a lot of ways to get sleep. And for, if you don't already know, get your cell phone away from your bedside, put it on airplane mode, make sure you don't have any of that kind of stuff around you while you're sleeping, because that certainly can amplify anything that is coming through those kind of artificial means of electromagnetic frequency. And I notice a big difference. And of course the modem is as far away from my bedroom as it possibly can be at my house, and as well as my meter, my electric meter. So I am grateful for that. So let's look at it, right? Let's look at some of the space weather as well. And for those of you who haven't seen yet that are a monthly subscriber, that tier 2 monthly subscription, for the Catalyst Classroom, I'm going to try to schedule this week for our last session, our live Q&A, but if it doesn't work, it's okay. I know that we're in this, right now we are in the week of break. So that Thursday is Thanksgiving, of course, and it can be hard to get things scheduled, especially people traveling. I know people are getting sick again, of course. That just seems to be par for the course right now. And to just, if we don't get it scheduled, it's okay. But that has been so far, I think, one of the more successful Catalyst Classrooms. I'm getting tons of really good feedback about it. I'm actually interested in maybe posting some of it publicly, just to give people an idea of the caliber of information that is available through that, because it's pretty, for how little the monthly membership is, the amount of data and research that goes into these presentations is substantial. And I love doing it, so it is no thing for me, but the amount of information that's available, I think, is pretty good, considering how modest the monthly membership is, plus the fact that we do the Zoom calls on a regular basis as well. You get a 10% discount on all of my services as a member, right? You have a special promo code for that, and we have a private Telegram chat group, which gets way more action than the normal Catalyst chat function on Telegram. Anyway, so here we are with our Schumann. We saw, this is just yesterday. So yesterday and Saturday night, there were some spikes, amplifications, right, where the wave function itself gets louder. And that also felt like, some of the best sleep I got was, Friday into Saturday as well. So I feel like that there was a strong, just a strong force field, right? Something very vital that came through that also allowed us to be buffered in some way. Not to say that the astral realm was not very active. The amount of information that I personally get through the dreamscape is immense, and it has not stopped, that's for sure, but it hasn't been as disturbed. So maybe that's just me personally, but I do see these connections in terms of the solar wind and the Schumann getting loud and the way that I experience these things. So, just another view of the Schumann just to see. It didn't get super loud. I mean, it has been really high in the past. So 42. This was more of a long duration amplification, and it was about, didn't even really reach 35, but it was still enough to notice as everything else has been pretty consistent at its baseline for a while now. So we see the planetary index, right? This is a measure of the geomagnetic disturbance. So it was pretty mellow for the most part, and it started to amplify today, as you can see. And this is just another view of it as of today. This was over the weekend as well. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then into today. So it did elevate a little bit, but nothing scary, and certainly nothing that would cause us to worry. And there's this very big coronal hole. So I wonder, again, with the Schumann amplifying like that, this normally would be sending a very dense stream of solar particles towards us. And it really just kind of was like, meh, and I think that's pretty interesting that it was just meh. Now, you can see here that there was a CME impact, right? You can see that the impact was here with the solar wind speed, the temperature, and an elevation again in the plasma density, right? What's density other than mass per volume? And you can see here the phi angle flip and the BZ being much below zero and being very active shows that there's also, I look at this and I think, well, that's kind of like what it looks like when the field itself is like wobbling, and it's like throwing a stone in a pond, right? And you get the ripple effect, and then you throw another one in, and it disrupts it and changes it and impacts it. That's what this looks like to me. So, there were some disturbances, of course. Now, one of the things I think is very interesting, let's see if it'll actually update for me right now. The map wasn't necessary. Yeah, the map's not available. So this is just in the last 7 days. So I'm going to show it to you right now. Even as of today, right? There's almost a 7 magnitude earthquake in Indonesia. It's too bad the map's not here, because it shows you how much it's on the Ring of Fire, all of these. But in the last 7 days, just look at the stream of earthquakes that are above 4.5 magnitude. It's just endless in the last week. There's just so many. And for how little geoelectric influence there's really been over the last week, this is pretty interesting. And remember, we're still in the eclipse window, aren't we? We're still in it. We're still in the eclipse window because this lunar cycle is at its end. So the moon's coming into Scorpio today. We're in our balsamic phase, right? The distilled essence of the lunar cycle. And we're still finishing out the eclipse window. Like, we've exited the eclipse window, but the lunar cycle itself is still finishing out. So there's still stuff. There really is still stuff that is bouncing around here when it came to all of that energy around the eclipse. The deeply embedded soul work that is happening. So just pay attention to that. And, a balsamic moon, we're going to see the reading. There's a lot of fire and action in this reading, especially because we had a third quarter moon with the moon in Leo, and we have Mercury, Venus in Sag, conjunct today in Sagittarius. The sun is about to come into Sagittarius. Of course, we have Mars opposite the sign of Sag, which is Gemini, as well, going on today. And there is a lot of action in fire. You can really feel it moving around. They can feel the friction actually happening that is creating that catalyzing heat or fire or reaction. But just keep in mind that a balsamic moon, right, the last 45 to 30 degrees of the lunar cycle is not a great time to be making new decisions or to be taking new action. It's a time to really reflect back on this entire lunar cycle. And the moon is going to cross over not only the points of the eclipse of this cycle, it's going to cross over the points of the last eclipse cycle, which was May and June, those last degrees of Scorpio. So we're really finally going to be closing out that period. And of course, the moon, or not only the moon coming into Scorpio, but the sun in the last degrees of Scorpio, not only is in opposition to the Pleiades, right? So we have a big Pleiadian window that's been open with the sun in Scorpio. It's in a trine to Procyon, so there's a big window into Procyon, and that's Starseed activation. And then Alpha Centauri, right? Alpha Centauri, the last degree of Scorpio into the first degree of Sagittarius. And Alpha Centauri not only is our closest galactic neighbor at 4.5 light years away, it also is in the constellation of Centaurus, right in the front left foot or leg of the centaur. And as I talked about actually with the Sagittarius new moon forecast, I did share that there is a Sagittarius constellation, which is along the ecliptic plane, but there's also a Centaurus constellation, which is in the southern sky. So for those of us in the northern hemisphere, we don't get to really see the southern hemisphere at all, right? You have to rely upon your software. If you have astronomy software, you have to rely upon the telescopes that are in the southern hemisphere, which is mostly like Chile, right? That has a big telescope down there in South America. And Alpha Centauri starseeds, they tend to be very self-sacrificing. So there is this tension relief that is part of the last degree of Scorpio, which I think is something to really put a pin in right now, because it has to come from a place of bountiful energy and not something that you are giving of yourself necessarily. And I'll tell you what, Neptune in Pisces, even in its retrograde, is really dissolving everything. So it's very difficult to know what is us, what is not us. And so we may find ourselves substantiating things unconsciously from our own energies that is really much more, well, I would say it's much more to our own benefit to be kind of a channel for that, as opposed to letting our own energies. And the third quarter moon and that forecast, that report that was exclusive to the monthly membership for those of you who listen to it, that moon in Leo, it was like making sure that we each individually in our own energy, our own internal landscape, our own emotions, is able to really have the energy to get through this next phase, because there's so much fire, as we're going to see in the reading. Oh my gosh. You will notice that without the waters, right, that beaming sun turns into a desert. And I would venture to guess that as much as this reading, as we're seeing in front of us, has so much of this positivity. I mean, the sun is at the center of the reading, at the heart of the reading. You can't go wrong with that. But you also see that we have the Chariot of Fire, the Prince of Wands, that is the causal factor, but our Three of Wands is reversed, right? The Three of Wands, the sun in Aries, virtue, and it's reversed. This is definitely a red flag for me. And so we'll go into all of this reading. So let's see here. So Adam B is here on the chat. My little ladies are away for a few days. I took an Epsom salt bath last night and slept great. Good job. Well done, Adam. You are taking such good care of yourself. Good morning to Megan, is wide awake in Tennessee. Made it and glad to be here. I'm so glad to see you as well. Yeah, people are on break right now, right? Everybody is just in that space now of at least here in the US, right? Because we have Thanksgiving on Thursday. So school is all the people that are going to public schools, institutions, whatever, people are on break right now. And it's a great time to take care of yourself. And in fact, this is a perfect opportunity to bring this in from the reading. So I do want to share a little bit. Let's just take a moment here to go over our reading from last week, just to see. Because it's kind of interesting here that we had the Prince of Cups in that reversal that led to, look at that, there's our Venus in the fire signs, the Princess of Wands. And I talked about that. Venus coming into Sagittarius. The fact that we had our moon in Leo, right? We don't want to burn ourselves out necessarily. And we want to make sure that the waters of our own soul are truly able to be brought into our experience, because with all of this heat and all of this energy, if there's no steam, if there's no water, there's no steam to turn the turbine, right? And then you just end up burning yourself out. And there is a lot of fire in this energy. We see the Six of Forces back in this reading as well. In both of these, you know, this was at the top of last week's reading, and now it's back as a guide point. So there's still something here that has to do with feelings of disempowerment, giving our power away, not being, you know, and having our life turned upside down in the most extreme instances. And there was our willow and the seagull, right, that we are focusing on healing. And then we have the divine physician back at the top of this reading, again, about self-care, about healing as well. So the weasel really led us to be able to be silent, to get down low, to be observant. And now we're at the exact opposite with the condor, right? To get the bird's eye view, not be so enmeshed in the situation. So just to share with you where we've been and what this is presenting for us moving forward. So let's look at our Prince of Wands here, our Chariot of Fire. Now, that's something that came out as we talked about in the Zoom call, actually, for those of you that listen to the replay, that are subscribers, and were there live as well. That was something that came out in terms of an archetype, right? The Chariot. What is it that's like holding the waters of your soul? What allows you to be vulnerable and to feel safe and contained, right? So that those still waters can run deep, right? And if there was ever a sign about still waters running deep, it's definitely Scorpio. And when we look at the astrology for today, specifically, we're going to see that connection with Black Moon Lilith, right? The lunar apogee and the nodes of the moon. So, and I do have a very special reading offering that I'm going to share with you, so stay tuned till after we're done here so that you can check it out. And if you don't stay tuned, that's totally fine. You can get on my email list, because I'm going to send out the email with all the information today to my list. You can do that by accessing it through catalystenergies.net. I'm definitely burning sage. That's what this smoke is right now. So clearing away a lot of stuff. So, and again, right, you have to burn something in order to get smoke. So the fire is definitely important, and it's a big part of how we act on things. So, and our creativity as well. So the Prince of Wands, I mean, here's the Chariot of Fire, quite literally. He's got the Leo, the lion, right, pulling the chariot. You got this bird on the top of the staff. You also got this really flaming type of headdress that's going on here with the prince. This is the heir of fire. Like I said, the Chariot of Fire. So this is a very willful and very impulsive energy. And these court cards, as we know, represent actual people. So they are us. They are people in our lives. They may be a public figure that is representing this energy. So you can kind of guess here that this is going to be embodied by people or ourselves. And it's a hot storm filled with action, right? Willful, impulsive energies. We want it now and we want it all. I got that Veruca Salt energy coming in with that, right? And when delays happen with what we want and wanting it now, it provokes outbursts, right? Tantrums. But the good thing about this is that it's endless courage and tenacity. And there's like a fiery kind of youthful energy that's coming into a new situation. So that's something to consider as well. The heir of fire. This is very masculine. It's very impulsive. It's very willful, and it's a hot storm. And it's the lion, right, that is pulling us. Now, if we did not take heed of that third quarter moon with the moon in Leo and making sure that we had all of our provisions within us going through and into this next cycle, where are we, do we even have the means to pull this chariot? That's a really good question. But I do see here that we and somebody in our lives, right, whether it's us or a public figure or somebody in our life coming in and really driving this. And of course, this is Cancer into Leo, right? And Leo is ruled by the sun, which is exactly what is at the heart of this reading here. So you can't ever go wrong with the sun, truly. It's number 19 in the tarot. It is all of vitality, optimism, joy of life, creativity. It's a power always giving without reducing itself. Now, we just talked about for the last three plus weeks about our sun and all of the things astrologically, esoterically, metaphysically, mythologically, and scientifically about the sun. So, factor a lot of that in if you got to listen to that in terms of vitality, optimism. And the fifth house is really the blossoming of our nature. It is the flowering of our own creativity, and the sun rules the fifth house. And so the best case scenario here is living for very generous and unconditioned principles, right? It's not conditioned by anything that has to do with materiality necessarily, other than the soil in which we are implanted. But again, without a root system to draw the waters, what happens to a plant? It withers and dies. So that's something to consider as well, especially with all this really impulsive energy coming in with the Prince of Wands to this moment. But I mean, we can feel the sun. And again, like I said, the sun is at the last degrees of Scorpio today, conjunct Alpha Centauri, this starseed origin, and truly Centaurus as the nature of Chiron. Now, the Sagittarius constellation is also a centaur, but it's more of the Sagittarius resonance or frequency. Centaurus in the southern hemisphere is meant to commemorate Chiron, right? Chiron that has the Christ frequency. Chiron that represents how we come into our superpower and release ourselves from our own suffering by acknowledging it, by not bypassing it or outsourcing it. And it's the same thing if we are to be or acknowledge in some ways this relief from social tension, we also have to be willing to acknowledge where it's coming from other than just ourselves, right? And just like the sun gives without taking anything back necessarily, this is where we want our heart to be. I would say, right? This is something that we can really embody. And of course, there's a reason that Thanksgiving is when the sun comes into Sagittarius, roughly, because it's that fire at the root of what it all means that really illuminates our understanding. It illuminates our wisdom, okay? So there is so much of this vitality and joy and optimism here at the center. And what's coming into it is I would say, a cognitive energy, especially with Mercury and Sagittarius. It is swift, right? With Mercury and Sag. Now, Mercury does not like being in Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is the opposite sign of its home. I mean, Gemini is where Mercury wants to be. So there's a swiftness with Mercury and Sag. You don't really have a lot of time to process the material because the reaction is that much faster, and it's just expanding and expanding. And Jupiter is going to station direct on the day of the Sagittarius new moon, which is on Wednesday at 1 to 2 degrees Sagittarius. So, I mean, there is this it's so beautiful and so optimistic expansion and fortune. And Jupiter being in another home sign of Pisces, stationing direct. I mean, the spiritual and transcendent nature of this. And truly, the sunlight will be moving through the prism of our own spiritual understanding and refract into all of this rainbow, right? That shows us the actual frequency of the different colors, right? It's no less light. It just shows you that it's operating at a different frequency. And this is something that I came to a long time ago, trying to understand people in relation to myself. Being a strong Sag person is just like, everybody's operating at their own frequency. It doesn't mean they're any less of a divine being, even though their resonance might be at a different wavelength than us. Just like all of our chakras are operating at a different frequency. So I love that this is at the center here, but it's also something to consider that without the waters of our soul and our own intuitive nature, if we have not cultivated the chariot, if we have not cultivated that high priestess within ourselves, and truly if we have not found a way to hold all of our resources within us as we travel, this is going to burn us. It's going to burn us out, right? We're going to become dry and arid like the desert. And I'll tell you what, like the fact that it's so cold, it's really dry around here. So it's just like all the moisture is getting sucked out of my body. So I'm physically really feeling this as well. So now, when it comes to, when that first popped out, because it comes out the way I read it, is this, the causal factor, then the heart of the matter, and then I start pulling the cards for our energetic axis. And so this is where it got a little interesting, because I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. That is so great. And then I was like, whoa, where did that come from? So again, the forces are an action-oriented element in the Akashic Tarot, and you can see it. It's pretty self-explanatory. The lightning bolt, right? The splitting apart, as it were, by that natural homeostasis that lightning represents. Now, it is retrograde. It is reversed. So oftentimes this represents that the storm is already past. It's been dispersing. So we may need to clean up after it. We may need to set down new roots. Seek new ground and apply our energy to things that really compel us right now, as opposed to just being present with the splitting apart. And this is a divine power. So when you look at this in its reversal, it's actually, the energy is actually moving up, right? You see that in this view, the lightning bolt is striking down from the heavens, but when it's in its reversal, you see that it is actually releasing from the ground. And lightning does that as well. It doesn't always start from above. There are times where lightning will shoot up from the ground as well. And this is about a divine power moving up through us. Now, this is where our subconscious our root is energetically, what is stabilizing us energetically, what may be going on underneath the surface that we're not fully consciously aware of, but is still very much motivating our behaviors and our thoughts and our actions, right? What's going on in the subconscious has so much more to do with what is being attracted to us than our conscious thoughts. It's more like our conscious thoughts and our that process of our internal dialogue is really a reflection or an extension of what is embedded in our subconscious, okay? Which is why hypnosis can be really beneficial for certain things to change a series of patterns in your life, right? Or yoga nidra, right? Which is a self-imposed type of hypnosis where you are led to plant new seeds in your own subconscious rather than somebody else doing it for you. I'm a big fan and proponent of yoga nidra, because you yourself are the one implanting the new seeds as opposed to kind of, trusting someone else to do it. And I do have mixed feelings about hypnosis, I'm not going to lie. And I have my own experiences that have led me to having those mixed feelings. So if it works for you, and I know that it has with people in certain types of situations, that's great. QHHT, same thing. I have mixed feelings about it, although I know that it has provided a lot of insight and benefit for people in their own journeys. So, but that's why Yoga Nidra, you're the one that is taking yourself into that state and implanting new subconscious, new seeds into the subconscious. Anyway, the idea here is that there's already been a dispersal. Like, it's already kind of happened. And not even kind of happened. The lightning bolt of change, right? That tower moment is already passed by. And it's time to kind of clean up the mess, right? And I think that sometimes we get kind of caught up in waiting for this moment, this, dramatic moment of transmutation. And I would say, especially with where Mercury and Venus are conjunct today, we'll get into that with the astrology. I would say that at the root here, there's already been this type of experience has already transpired, right? The storm is already dispersing. It's already happened at a deep subconscious level. And when we get into the guidance around it, right, the scribe reversed and the condor, this I think is where we can utilize our energy and focus more than just kind of like waiting in some ways for this massive event to occur, because I would argue that it's already transpired at a subconscious level. Maybe your dream state is giving you insight into this already. Maybe it's just the process of just waiting in some ways for this to happen. And again, with the sun, if you think about it from a more electric universe, plasma cosmology perspective, then it's always happening, right? It's a consistent process. It never not is happening in terms of the electrical impulses that are released into our experience, right? Much like lightning is a balancing homeostasis type of event where it is the release of electrons from, ions in order to balance the atmosphere. So I would encourage and invite you to consider, like, well, maybe this is already transpired. It's time to clean up after ourselves and kind of move on and start setting down new roots. And of course, if you remember from last week's reading, it was really about, if we bring it back up, let me find it real quick, right? When we looked at this reading from last week, right? We had the three of forces, the bird's nest at the root here about, creating a space, right? And then here's your tower moment of the caught in the ruins, right? And we talked about how, what is it that you're creating a space for? Well, I would argue that between last week and this week, especially with that third quarter moon, and yesterday, wow, we had the sun in a trine to Jupiter. It's one of the most sought after, and like one of the best astrological transits you can ever have is the sun in a trine to Jupiter. So I would also say that maybe we've gotten this insight and we've had kind of this moment already, and now it's time to move forward with, again, building something else or setting down new roots, perhaps just cleaning up after ourselves, and moving forward. So we saw the lightning bolt. Now, we got our divine physician. Now, this has been coming up quite a bit. And again, self-care, right? The idea of spiritual healing is related to this. Number 6, right? That is the number of humanity, right? The carbon atom has 6 protons and 6 neutrons, and in its neutral form has 6 electrons, right? When it's reversed, again, we've lost sight of our self-care. And I would say even in this situation, we might be more aware of our need to get back on track to that healing, right? So, for instance, Adam B. in the chat talked about how the fam is out of town for a little bit, and he took the opportunity to get back into, the things that work for him for self-care. So, again, that's something to consider. And then also, too, when this card is reversed, it does show that maybe we've forgotten the power of the ingredients of our own health and wellness, which has to do our emotions, our feelings, and how they transpire into thoughts, ideas, and behaviors, and how that all feeds together into our own health and wellness. Of course, number 6 related to the 6th house in astrology, the Virgo house. This is where it actually happens. And again, we go back to Chiron being the ruler of Virgo and the 6th house. It is not about bypassing our suffering or outsourcing it to other people. And this is a big Sagittarius thing in my experience, right? We get so into the big picture that it's really, Sagittarius is in a square to Virgo, right? It doesn't, it causes a friction between those actual detail-oriented things that we're doing for ourselves and the big picture of what it all means, right? It's very easy to get caught up in what it all means without actually taking the time to take care of ourselves. So I think there's right now and throughout the week, there will be a enhanced focus on getting back into the self-care. Again, being more in tune with not just our intuition, but our intellect, as the chimpanzee will show us. And then there's that 6 of forces. So those 2 6s together as well, both reversed, right? So again, kind of this enhanced focus on where is our power leaking away? How are we giving it away? How is that impacting our ability to experience health and wellness? And we'll talk about more of the chimpanzee when we get there. So this I see as not so much of maybe a realization that we've let some things slip, but I would say just a hyper or more focused attention on our self-care, as opposed to getting caught up in the hot storm of the mind, which that Prince of Wands, for all of that really tenacious, courageous energy, can easily burn us out and leave us like without any emotional sensitivity, okay? So, and the virtue, right? When you have the 3 of Wands reversed like this, oh my. So it is the sun in Aries, right? The sun in the 2nd decan of Aries. So we can when it's reversed, right? We can overestimate ourselves. It can be very conceited. Just think about the sun in Aries and how, Aries sun people on the dark side of things can really get into this energy of just being really rash and impulsive again, and not really considering how that energy maybe like is an electrical burn for other people. So overestimating ourselves, we could get moody, we could get rude. These are all ways that we express ourselves when we've completely, burn ourselves out, and lose direction. That again, with that Six of Forces reversed, we can really lose direction and feel like giving up in some ways. Losing steam. Whoa, I didn't even think about that. I'm like reading my notes right now, and I was like, oh yeah, losing steam. If there's not enough water, if our soul is not filled, right? If we don't have the camel hump filled with water, we're going to lose steam. And what does steam do? It turns the turbines so that we can have energy. Or it could be a false start. All of these things. So at first I was like, man, this reading kind of sucks. But it's really just to not lose sight of what we're here to do, because there'll be lots of very powerfully optimistic, beneficial things coming with Jupiter stationing direct at a Sag new moon at Thanksgiving here in the US. And you can see things happening out there that are leading us to be like, oh yeah, this is good, this is good, this is good. And it is good, right? There's no reason not to enjoy this process. But if we're waiting for something to happen, like this grand thing, I would invite you to consider that it's already right? It's already happened at a soul level, and perhaps we need a broader perspective in order to not get caught in this Three of Wands that's reversed, and then we lose steam, right? We have a false start. We find ourselves being so impacted by this really rash, impulsive behavior that when it doesn't have any staying power, we find ourselves acting out of that, and that can be that can be not a really good recipe for, holiday weekends, right? Especially if you have a lot of family stuff going on, or there's so much possibility right now to really mend some things and to find common ground with Sagittarius right now. And to also know that there is a subtlety that is, these cosmic rhythms that are influencing our own experience right now that may have more impact than we actually think. So again, we don't want to burn ourselves out. We want to make sure that we are always tapped in. Our root system is always tapped in. And that was what the Willow was all about last week. So it's just building. You can feel it building right now. So this, I think, is very interesting, the scribe. So number 12, right? So we're looking at the 12th house. We're looking at the house of endings. And this is where that isolation piece comes in. So notice the scribes. They're recording the information, and they become the most knowledgeable and the most learned people in a community because they are writing it all down. They are taking it all in. And they're not around anyone else except themselves, right? There is no real going out into the community and applying this information as much as recording it, taking it all in, okay? So one of the things that really came out with this in terms of this lightning bolt, right, this Eight of Forces, and this is a guidance point, is that we may be ignoring opportunities for higher learning or uplifting discovery because maybe we think it's over, right? And I do feel like in a lot of ways there is this coming to terms with some sort of ending. Like the lightning bolt has already happened, and now we're kind of cleaning up and we are moving on to new territory. So, but this is saying that, we may be ignoring opportunities to go to the next level. We may be closing our mind to new and broader thought. We may be closing ourselves off to studies that can take us far above where we find ourselves today because we're just like, well, it's kind of over, right? Or whatever. And with the condor along with this is a really strong message to keep your mind open and keep it, open your mind and keep it open, right? Just like I talked about, the fractal of meaning and the story. I mean, human beings operate through story, through narrative, right? This whole thing about narrative, controlling the narrative. Well, that's because that's how we manifest reality, is through those patterns of meaning. And so we may find that our projects may seem thwarted. There's that three of wands reversed, right? We may need to step back and be patient for other opportunities to come around. And part of that might be opening our mind, keeping it open, not ignore opportunities for higher learning in this situation. And I would say, coupled with the condor in this position here, I would really recommend that we all take a step back if we are feeling thwarted, if we are feeling kind of like losing steam, if we're like, oh, that's it and whatever. And yes, that is it to a certain extent. But if we just assume, oh, we've made it, I would say that you may want to take a step back. And some people are too stubborn to do that, right? Because they've invested so much into a perspective that then, especially Taurus people, when they're too stubborn to take a step back and really discern the reality of what's taking place because they are too close to it, right? And a lot of times we want to fix things. And here's our Chiron wound coming out in Aries, by the way. The pattern that keeps us from doing this, to be so enmeshed in a situation, is guilt. It comes from guilt of not doing enough to fix something, right? And so there's our Chiron savior complex that comes in. And again, with Sagittarius in the mix, it's very easy to be like, here I come to save the day type of thing. And so true detachment is really objective compassion. And the condor is about getting that much bigger picture and not being so enmeshed in the situation that we can't take a step back and be like, it's time for the next, the next unfolding here. And there's nothing wrong with stating your preferences. It's the attachment to getting your own way in this situation that gets us pulled right back into the story, and then we become a victim of the story. Maybe we need to, take down some more information as the scribe so that we get more of the details of the story that we couldn't see because we were right up next to it. Like we were so close that we didn't see the full picture. So again, that's something to consider as well, because just because this one lightning bolt has happened, just because this one storm has passed, doesn't mean there won't be more, right? And if we, blew ourselves out on this one thing, it's going to be really difficult in order to take this perspective when the next one starts brewing, right? Because again, it's a constant process. It's not just something that happens as a one-off and then it's over. And lots of us have been led and continue to be led into that type of mindset. I would really caution us, all of us, to consider that this is an infinite expansion and unfolding. And of course, Jupiter stationing direct is going to be a big part of this. If you can, your heart is the prism, and if you can really see the full spectrum of all of it in all its beautiful iterations of the rainbow, you're going to do so much better than if you are, really hyper focused on just this one color. Okay. So when it comes to the healing aspect that we're paying attention to now, the chimpanzee, haven't seen this one in a while. This is about using both our intellect and our intuition, right? So starseeds or empaths, they tend to be hyper fixated on their intuition, right? And just anything that intuitively comes to mind is what it is, and kind of neglecting their own rationality. Same thing on the other side of things. There are people that are hyper fixated on their rationality and their intelligence, and they don't actually trust their gut feeling. They don't even know what that feels like. They have no idea what their gut feels like. They are just hyper fixated on the capacity for reasoning. This is bringing both of these things together. So again, it's about doing more research. Maybe the healing stuff that we've been doing isn't taking us where we want to go because we need to broaden our search a little bit, do more research, take a step back. Walk away from the problem after researching it, and you may find that unexpected insights will surface, okay? One thing about chimps, well, there's a lot of things about chimps, obviously, that we share, like this ridiculously high amount of genetic cohesion with chimps, right? Like 98%. And there's a lot of different ways that there's the standard evolution model, right? There is the idea that we are somehow genetically manipulated from their genetics, right? That's much more on there's a lot of different perspectives about how that came to be. One thing about chimps that I recently discovered just through searching it out, and really there was a joint effort into understanding this perspective, especially from a person that is really still staunchly connected to the standard Darwinian evolution. So it prompted more research into just understanding chimps more and their capacity for reasoning and intelligence and things like that. So it's been an interesting journey. But one of the things that was collectively learned is that chimps, their short-term memory is phenomenal, right? They learn so much faster in terms of pattern recognition, in terms of memorization, things like that. Like the Gemini quality of the chimpanzee in terms of learning is way beyond humans, okay? Like their ability to recognize patterns and to make connections in a very short amount of time is astounding, way more than us. So I think that's something to consider, is that chimps have an intellect in that way that far surpasses our own ability to do that. So there's something there about this pattern recognition that when it is coupled with the intuitive aspect that humans embody, right? The ability to conceive of wisdom and big picture and to tell stories. This combination of things is something that is really going to work in our favor, especially when it comes to the idea here of discovering, like, where are we losing power here, right? Where is the situation where we are feeling loss of power, rather than being emotionally reactive and giving our power away to someone else's agenda? Maybe we're not actually following the red flags of our own intuition. And speaking very personally about this, it happens a lot. And it happens because we don't want to actually admit, because we're so close up to something, that we are ignoring some really obvious things, and our gut is saying, hey, again, through our dreamscape, perhaps, just through different types of situations. If we are stuffing it away because we're too stubborn to be like, oh, maybe I have been ignoring this obvious intuitive thing here this whole time. All the intellect in the world isn't going to make a difference if you don't couple it with that intuition. And when we're talking about the waterfall, there is this sense of emotional power and intuitive power that can shape a landscape, right? But if we're not really putting those aspects of our intuition and our intellect, right? If we're not keeping our minds open to a whole new perspective and at least entertaining it, we're going to lose steam really quickly. And this whole period right now that it's just so full of potential, with the sun and all of this fire energy, all this Sag energy, Jupiter stationing direct. I mean, and the fact that the sun and Jupiter were just in a trine yesterday, there's a lot of potential here. But we risk losing it in just having it burn away and not actually turning any turbine for our own creative transformation if we aren't using that broader perspective. So, and I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I'm very hesitant to make those predictions necessarily, but you can feel the energy leading up to this kind of grand thing, especially with the new moon on Wednesday and Jupiter stationing direct, that there's a lot of potential here, but we also want to be aware of our own process, right? And not giving ourselves away to someone else's agenda. That's the whole point of influence operations. So I'm going to check in with the stream here and see how people are feeling here. It's bitter cold in Georgia this weekend and even colder here in Tennessee at home. Yeah, it is crazy cold around here, just on the whole East Coast. I wonder what it's like, and I'm sure the Midwest is no different. So Alex Case is getting the band back together. Oh my God. Wow. Good call on that one. Hope everyone has a wonderful week from Phoenix Rules. I'll be listening to this later and working on quilts. Oh, that's such a perfect type of, that's just a perfect type of activity for right now. And thanks for checking in. Totally. Let's look at the astrology here and see what we got going on. Just to familiarize ourselves now. All right. And for those of you who are monthly subscribers, those tier 2 subscribers to the Catalyst Classroom, just know that your new moon forecast, general forecast, is going to be available tomorrow as well. So just there will be a specific forecast and report for y'all or yins going into this new moon. Of course, if you are a Sag, Sun, Moon, or Rising person, you can check out your exclusive new moon forecast on this platform, whatever platform you are on, because that has already been posted and available to you. So this is our chart for today, the 21st. As you can see, the sun is at the last degrees of Scorpio. Coming into Sagittarius, you see Mercury and Venus together in Sagittarius. Now, this particular degree, they're going to be exactly conjunct at the 7 to 8 degree mark. And this is about psychic gestation. This is the alchemical fire. And when you have Mercury and Venus together, you really do have the potential to really express yourself, your love, your express the value, the meaning of things. But there is this incredible, it's like the magma under the surface is going to be so accessible to the mind, to our physical feels. We may have an eruption in some ways, but it also feels like that whatever it is, the potential to purify at that level is substantial. And also know that when we come into the new moon on Wednesday, both of these planets, Venus and Mercury, which are between us and our sun, they're both going to be conjunct Antares, and that is the fire of God. That is Archangel Uriel, the fire of God. And so talk about purifying fire and Phoenix energy, okay? So the alchemical fire, which both purifies and transforms. This is the conjunction that really inspired today's transmission and the title for the Starseed ministry. So there are forces at work in deep layers, which in their own way respond to outer stimulation. There's that lightning bolt again. And they're really released by the tension of relationship or relationship to society, right? The friction of polarity. So the process has been ongoing, right? It's just that we don't really notice it until it becomes obvious that something has changed. And I would argue, again, with this lightning bolt, this 8 of forces reversed, is the fact that it's already been going on. It's just the evidence of this change is going to present itself with this this conjunction today. And this is going to happen towards the end of today, like in the late afternoon, mid to late afternoon here in the U.S., depending on where you are. Of course, into the evening on the other side of the pond, right? So a new level of awareness becomes, it's going to be very accessible through our physical feels, through that sense of value and beauty and love and enthusiasm, right, with Venus, and easily expressed with Mercury. But it'll be swift, right? It'll be something that you haven't really thought about. It'll just be coming out your mouth, right? And that's a good thing for the most part. So the very nature of us goes through modification when we're talking about this degree, and it's like a psychic gestation. And so maybe you'll speak things that aren't quite fully formed yet, but you also may give voice to stuff that has been happening in your feels, in your body, in your embodied experience that has been going on for a while, right? Now, it's going to be very important to take that bird's eye perspective, right? And to not close yourself off as you come into this one change, right? Just because there's been one change doesn't mean there won't be more. And I think that that's something really important to consider, and that a new level of awareness is being reached. Okay. And all that does is it's the next level. If you've ever watched any, Mathstown is one of the channels I really like on YouTube, where they put music to this endless Mandelbrot set, or Julia sets, or whatever, these fractals. The idea here is that you're zooming in to and zooming out, and you see this beautiful thing that is unfolding, and then you realize that that beautiful thing becomes the tiny little piece of the next thing, right? You have to consider that Sagittarius is like that. It is an infinite expansion of understanding and large-scale patterns. So this moment here is just a moment of completion, but then beginning a new creation and expansion. Just like with the light going through the prism, it's just showing you all the iterations. It's not showing you that any of these things are any less connected to the sun or light or source or whatever. Again, it's important to realize the stuff's been going on for quite a while now, okay? And it's just about to be surfaced and being realized. And I would say giving a channel of expression with Sagittarius, right? It may be, there's not going to be a lot of time to process it necessarily, because it's already been happening. It's just going to kind of find its way to the surface. And that's okay, right? That's okay. Find a way to make the best of that. It might be... just also realize there's certain things you can't take back. And Chiron in Aries, right? Mars retrograde in Gemini. All of these things also add to this experience here of just like, right? And I don't really feel that that could be the case necessarily for anybody that's here, but you never know, right? So it's always good to, don't want to stifle yourself. In fact, I don't think that's even possible. I don't even think you can really stifle this. I think that it is already been, happening. Like I said, it's just going to come to the surface now. So I don't think there's any chance of really stifling it. And that 10 of Wands in the tarot, Saturn in Sagittarius, for instance, you don't push the fire down. It will find another place to burn. So giving yourself that, just the ability to shine, right? Without expecting anything. That's the other thing about having that objective compassion. So the other thing I want to point out too is that Lilith is still in orb to Sirius, and was in a direct trine very early this morning with the South Node. So again, as we release the power of the South Node, or K2, or the tail of the dragon, in terms of just going deeper and deeper and deeper into new connections at the communal level, it's the real power, I think, comes from the activation with Lilith and the North Node, or Rahu, of where we're going, which is emergence, right? We're not trying to go deeper into the soup necessarily, although that has a benefit and it releases a lot of power because we default back to that position. It's about emerging out into somewhere new, into a new, fresh kind of outlook in close proximity to where we're emerging out of. And Lilith, of course, is such a primal power that it's really about establishing and keeping that space within us, and instead of trying to fill it with something. And of course, this is in a direct square to what? Chiron and Aries, right? If we are trying to fill that, we're going to, again, be very rash and impulsive and try to change something that you can't change right away, because it has to go through its own stages of growth and transmutation. And in fact, it's just going to be an experience of frustration, and that in the moment may feel good, but it's not actually going to make the change that you really are looking for. And so this is that square. I mean, it's happening pretty much right now. So that's something to consider. And the Syrian starseeds know full well that it's in their connection to the infinite and to life itself that gives them the capacity to not only be sensitive to their role as custodian or protector or guardian, but it also allows the shaman, for instance, to really be able to walk into the non-physical in order to facilitate healing or facilitate protection of the community or the family or the group. So we can't do that if we're trying to fill that space that Lilith represents by way of just again, this rash, impulsive energy that is triggered because we want to, try to save somebody or come in as the savior. And Sag energy really feels, I think, because of the capacity to represent the big picture, will often attempt to do that. And so just know, too, over the weeks that Venus and Mercury and the Sun are all going to come in a trine to Chiron on the ascendant of the U.S. chart. And that's something that I've talked about in previous readings, and I'll talk about it coming into the new moon report for the subscribers as well, because it's really pretty substantial that the U.S. ascendant at 12 to 13 degrees of Sagittarius is going to have a triple trine over here to Chiron. So again, it's not over, but it is in some ways. Some things have already transpired. They're just coming to the surface now, just like that widow's past is brought to light at 12 to 13 degrees Sagittarius. It's not necessarily about what had, it's more about what has already transpired, not clouding the purification of the process of the next cycle. And it's going to be a big theme coming into the next couple of weeks. So we do see our moon has crossed over Arcturus and Spica and is also going to come into Scorpio today. And so there's always a lot of quincunx, there's quincunxes with Libra and Pisces, where we have Neptune, where we have Jupiter, both in their retrogrades. And but at this point, the moon, as she was crossing over Arcturus, was in a square to Pluto, which again is in the same degree about having that transcendent realization. Now, Pluto and Capricorn can be really, completely destabilizing because the secure mechanisms and institutions of our communities, our world, our governments, our economy are going through the alchemical process of Pluto. And so it's a test for each of us to adapt to that and to just lean into the discomfort of while everything's falling apart, I'm going to be up here sailing above it. But I'll tell you what, that perspective has made all the difference in my life in the last couple of weeks. So I would invite you to consider that as well as we are going through these next couple of weeks, especially. And this balsamic moon, right? To really just honor all of the deep work that has been happening with this eclipse cycle, okay? This is a great time to do that. What else is happening today? Well, the moon will move into Scorpio. And one of the things that also happened as of today, besides the Mercury-Venus conjunction that's happening later today, is asteroid Vesta has now moved into 0 degrees Pisces. That means it's going to cross Fomalhaut, which is one of the royal fixed stars. It's going to meet Cygnus. This is a huge starseed activation. And what is Vesta? It is the hearth flame. It is the flame of our spiritual transmutation. It is the flame that holds us all together. And so coming into Pisces, it has really got a spiritual component now. It has a transcendental component now. And the moon at 0 degrees Scorpio is going to be in a direct trine to this. So to also realize that we're all on this tour bus to hell together, right? And we all have our own experience emotionally of what that means, what that feels like to widen our experience. And it all comes to bear in Pisces, right? Again, you come back to that. It's not even just isolation. That's one of the things, but one way to look at it is like going to the farmer's market, right? Everything comes to market and everybody comes together in commerce to share and to bring forward all that we have put forward in our works and our labors, which is Virgo, 6th house, opposite Pisces. Opposite Pisces. So there's something about the spiritual and cosmic experience that Vesta is representing. And each of us today, with the moon crossing into Scorpio, the balsamic moon crossing into Scorpio, is just a reminder of what it feels like as we go on this journey together, what each of us is feeling on this journey together, and how emotionally it is really stabilized by the experience of all of it coming to bear, right? I mean, we all see how well our harvest is when we bring it all to the farmer's market and everybody's together, and it has a lot to do with not only bringing it together, but also the interchange, right? Organizing the converging and the conflicting interests of all of us together into some sort of mutual benefit, right? And there you see that all of it comes together, and there is one fabric of reality here. And the downside of this is being completely, just insensitive to the overall welfare of everyone, because the beginning of Pisces, the first half of Pisces, is federation. That's the word that is associated with it. So for good or for worse, for better or for worse, here we are, and we really find our flame of transmutation, our spiritual creative power together in what is coming to pass, right? What we're all offering into this situation and our experience of all kind of commingling around it. So when the moon comes into a trine with Vesta at 0 to 1 degree Scorpio today, pay attention to your own feelings and where your needs are around this, because you'll get a lot of information. Not saying you should act on it necessarily, but just be aware and sensitive to it. So like I said, we're going to go through, we're going to have our, the moon's going to cross over the nodal axis tomorrow. It's going to be opposite Uranus tomorrow on the 22nd. Of course, this is when the sun moves into Sagittarius, so I wouldn't be surprised if we get some kind of people really, really identifying and finding expression through that fire that holds us all together as we come through. And the moon meeting K2, it will be very tempting to want to, again, default back to that ability to just go deeper into making the connections with what's, where you already are. And it's going to cross over the eclipse points, all of them again. So to just hold space for that as we come into what will be the new moon on the 23rd as Jupiter stations as well. So when we go through the rest of the week, I'm just kind of browsing through here. Like I said, all of this, by Friday, we're going to have the moon and then Mercury and then soon Venus all in a trine to Chiron over this weekend. So that's the point of the United States natal chart ascendant, and we may find that it may be a very difficult process of purification, but we have a lot of opportunities to start conceptualizing it, start embodying it, depending on where Sag is in your chart, and then by the time the sun reaches that point, we'll be fully aware of how to express ourselves through that. And it'll either be very healing of this Chiron wound, or it's going to trigger it in a way that's just going to be false flag after false flag after false flag, and really trying to trigger people. So I do see that as a potential, although I'm not going to go out and specifically predict it. So my friends, that's all I have for today's Starseed Ministry. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of you so much. Let me share with you my newest offering, because I'm really excited about this. Is It's called the Galactic Oversoul. It's the Draconic chart for Starseed. So you can go to catalystenergies.net and learn more about what the Draconic chart really represents. But the idea here is that you have your natal chart, which is much more of the blueprint of your psychology and your individual nature in this incarnation. And the Draconic chart is looking at the unconscious drives and motivations of the individual. And when we look at the Starseed activations in the Draconic chart, you're getting a galactic oversoul view of not only the unconscious elements that are driving you, but how they are influencing your current Starseed activations, your current Starseed origins. So this is available for $99. It's a 90-minute recorded reading looking at your Draconic chart. And if you are a monthly subscriber, just know that you have to use your special promo code and you get 10% off of that, right? So this is at a sale already, and then you get 10% off if you're already a monthly subscriber. And this is going to be available, it's just going to be on my list of services from now on. So you can go to catalystenergies.net to get more information, to find out how to book this reading. I'm pretty excited about offering this. It's opening up so many doorways. Now, I do know that certain astrologers that do Starseed readings use the Draconic chart as part of it. I like to use it, the progressions, the natal chart and the progressions for the first Starseed reading. But this is just like everything else. This is like a whole new dimension of it that is woven into this pattern that is our oversoul and what we are doing here, especially as Starseed. So that's available through my website. The other thing I just want to remind you of, if you are a Gemini or Sagittarius person, this particular reading is available to you at the sale rate. It's just the lunar transit forecast. We're looking at the new moon and looking at the general themes for the Sag and Gemini sun, moon, and rising person. You get it at the sale rate. If you are a monthly member, just know you always have access to this sale rate for the lunar transit forecast, regardless of sign. But for those of you who are interested in this, you are a Sag or Gemini, you're not a monthly subscriber, but you're interested in this forecast, you can book that also through catalystenergies.net, which is linked in the description box below. So that's what I got for you guys this week for the Starseed Ministry. Regardless of where you are, have a great week. For those of you who do celebrate Thanksgiving or some iteration of it, regardless of what you're giving thanks for, Sagittarius season is very much about the big picture and meaning of our relationships. So however you look at that, I hope that you are finding what you need from that situation. So have a great week. I will see you guys next week on the 28th for the Starseed Ministry. My birthday is on Sunday, so I am looking forward to the weekend and celebrating that with anyone who is wanting to be part of that with me. So thanks, guys. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other the best way that you know how. Have a great week, and I'll see you on Monday. Take care.